Paul, we'll start with how things are here at the moment. Obviously, you had your postponement last week. How have things sort of settled down?
Well, today is the first day that we've had kind of near enough everyone back. Still missing one player. I'm not going to give names out. I don't think it's kind of appropriate. But so it's nice to get everyone back together. It's kind of almost like first day back of pre-season. But thankfully, obviously the players have had some work and games in them. Preparation is not ideal for this first game, but at the same time I think we're all keen to get the season underway, and looking forward to be back in front of the fans.
What impact has it had on training, Paul?
We basically couldn't train. You know, it was a big surprise. We'd done so well in one respect. We got through all pre-season up until that final week with no positive cases, and then received 2 cases on the Monday. And in my mind, I was just preparing for the game, still thinking, right, okay, what impact does that have on a potential team and the squad? But very quickly we received an email saying that we had to go into isolation, and then, you know, perform tests. But most of the players had to stay away for the full 10 days. So clearly, you know, a big impact, and I think I've got some good people, good pros that are professional, but it's still not the same as obviously kicking a ball around with your teammates. There's only so much they can do being in isolation, but you know, that's had an impact again on the last sort of preparations for the game in terms of how much we can get them to work. It would have been, the temptation would have been very easily to get them in and give them a real blast, but then conscious we've got a game Saturday, we've got a game Tuesday, so had to be careful with that. But in what we have done, at least they've looked pretty bright, to be honest. I'd like to think certainly that they were pleased to be back in training.
Without naming names, how are the affected players now?
They're all good, yeah, thank you. Again, the only sort of slight caveat I'd add to that, Matt, is again, we haven't pushed them anywhere close to the limits at the minute, so whether or not we get the full impact of that, I would probably say not. And it might be, whether it's Saturday, whether it's next week, we'll find out a little bit more on that, but certainly nothing obvious that stood out, and speaking to the players, that they seem in pretty good shape.
I know you've had injuries this summer. Which players won't be involved this weekend?
We've still got a couple certainly that won't be. I don't want to give too much away. Hopefully, you know, people listening or viewing will understand that. But certainly, you know, we'll be missing 2 for definite, and a couple more that will be difficult to get involved because of how much pre-season they have missed.
I see. Are you able to say who you got doubts over though? I know you're not able to say who won't be playing.
No, I think just the ones that have been injured for some time. You know, no fresh injuries to report. So yeah, if people stay patient and Saturday they'll get a better idea.
How do you view the selection process for the opening game then for you now, given the strengthening that you've done this summer?
Yeah, I've got some tough decisions to make, and you know, I've had a chat with the players today and emphasised the fact it is a squad game, and I doubt that very few will play all the games this season. Rightly or wrongly, I think football has changed to a degree in that aspect, and I hate to say it, but I think with what's going on and what we've just experienced, at some point I think we'll be impacted by it again. Hopefully not directly as in the camp, but maybe in opposition, and there might be various times or various teams we come up against. I think someone might be better for that game than others. I certainly want us to be flexible in terms of us formation and lineups, and we've seen a little bit of that through pre-season, some enforced in fairness, but that's been a challenge in itself for me as manager and the rest of the staff, trying to, you know, come up with different ways of playing. And I think credit to the players in the matches that we've played, they've coped with that relatively well. So there's going to be some disappointed people on Saturday, because I understand and respect the fact everyone will want to play that first game that is available, but said to them over the course of the season, I'm pretty sure most, if not all, will play the part, and to be ready, because it's all right having a plan. Things last minute can change, and you have to be ready to take that opportunity when it comes along.
Ideally, how will you want to set up this season?
I think, unfortunately, and if I'm being brutally honest, there's still an element of sort of finding that out. I've got certainly a couple of ideas of how I think we can play. I think pre-season's part of it has shown we can play a certain way, or a couple of ways realistically. But again, obviously, some of that's been without a centre forward. So that would change probably the dynamic of the team. Might not change the shape entirely, but what's asked of certain players in certain areas of the pitch. But you know, one thing I would say that I want us to be full of energy. So no matter what system we're playing, I want us to be forward thinking. I want forward runs, and I want us to be, you know, it's not everyone's favourite word, but I like it in terms of what I want my team to be aggressive. And aggressive can mean a few different things, but I want teams to certainly know that they've been in a game when they've played us, and I want us to ask questions of the opposition and play in a manner that hopefully, you know, the fans are left in no doubt that the team's at least given everything for the shirt and for them, as well as the teammates, and that's what I think Grimsby fans respect. Most football fans do, but I think certainly the Grimsby fans do. Obviously manage a lot of games when they've been in attendance, and you get a feel for that and what's important.
At what stage are you at with trying to bring in another striker? I know you've been asked this question so much this summer, but here we are a couple of days before the start
in
of the
fairness,
season.
Matt, I haven't been asked it for a little while, so it's a nice that he's not been every single day. But again, if I'm going to be trying to be transparent about it, not really close. I think Jason was on your show last night and put a couple of rumours to bed. You know, it does make me chuckle. It's the world we live in. I don't know if some people do it just to cause a stir, or they genuinely think they have spotted someone in the area. It's not been the case. And there is, you know, truthfully, again, I've said before, some players move, some strikers move, and some of those I've looked at and thought, yeah, they might have done a job, and for whatever reason we can't get them. There's others that move and I generally wouldn't have an interest in.
John McKinday one of those, because the Gillingham manager Steve Evans has come out and said Grimsby made an inquiry.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find out who's made that inquiry. And again, that's the truth. I don't know if we've employed a head of recruitment that I don't know about, but no, I don't know why that's being said. Whether it's again to try and drum interest up, or I'm really not sure. But no, that's not an inquiry that's been made.
Do you still have irons in the fire though? Not necessarily for this weekend.
I have in terms of a different position, but not in terms of the centre forward. I think we're now getting to a point where, because we're not part of the transfer window, that we may, you know, that's close to shutting, and I think then I'm kind of hoping, you know, there's no certainty, but hoping that a few players might not perhaps have moved that thought they might to a certain level, and therefore may become available to ourselves and other National League teams. Kind of it, I guess, in the past when I was here, the second time that we brought Connor Townsend in, you know, in truth, Connor was better than the National League. Had already played at that level, but because he was stuck at the club, he had a choice realistically of, you know, he either played the 23s or he came and played first team football, and because he'd enjoyed it before, he rejoined us. So that sort of scenario is potentially an option. There are one or two other lads that I'm kind of monitoring, but I'm not convinced by at this stage. I haven't seen enough of them. So, you know, the sort of quest still goes on, but nothing unfortunately to report this time.
What position are you looking at then, if you're not necessarily looking at a striker in the immediate short term?
Well, I'd rather keep
that
to myself, but it's as it stands, certainly in terms of loans, if I don't want to be in a position where we've got you know, or to the point where I've got to leave one out, I've got 2 more to sort of play with. And I don't really want to bring more than the 5 in. I guess the only time you can do that is if one of the ones we had gets injured and he's out for some time. You know, I think that's a position I don't enjoy. I had it last season, felt like forced that way, so where we were at, and maybe 1 or 2 I'd kind of made my mind upon. So you're then into obviously free agents, if they're the 2 markets really that we can look at.
How's it been as a window for you? Because we're in strange times, aren't we? How's it been?
Yes, I mean, I think we've had kind of 2 sort of little bursts of signings and then a steady sort of flow. There obviously has been so many changes to the squad that I felt was required and needed. But overall, I think for lots and lots of people out there, it's been a slow and difficult window. I think, you know, you speak to the agents, you speak to other clubs. I mean, the amount of managers I've spoke to that are still after a striker, it seems ridiculous that, you know, it's as though they've disappeared somewhere.
Where have they gone then?
Well, whether it's clubs holding on to them because they're scared, because of I've said this about the window before, sometimes it can make people, you know, kind of overload in areas and then trying to protect themselves almost, because if they might get a spate of injuries, they can't look into the future and see what exactly will happen. The 23s, I guess that stacks more players up, albeit younger ones in general. But yeah, honestly, there's so many people that are still searching, and you know, I did look at a player recently, wasn't in a position to really move, but I was certainly monitoring closely, and he's moved to a much higher level than I felt he would be playing. So I don't know whether I'm on the right track, the wrong track, depends which way you look at it, but it's seems a good time to be a striker at a club, because you're either in demand by the one you're at, or you know, there'll be plenty of takers.
Anybody going out at all?
No plans.
Okay.
At this time. The sort of younger players in the squad, young Jazz had an injury a couple of weeks ago, played for the youth team, and that's sort of the same for Louis Adlard, Evan, Corey. They can play for the youth team if it's a case of getting them game time, because the league's changed slightly. They can play as first year pros, but those lads, you know, potentially might be something we look at to get them some men's football elsewhere. But at present, because of the injuries that we've had through pre-season, then COVID, everyone's sort of together at this time.
The captain's armband has gone to Giles Coke.
Yeah.
What qualities have you seen in him that was worthy of giving him the skipper's armband?
Well, I've just been speaking to his car school there, and clearly not understanding when an interview's taking place isn't one of them. Given him a couple of tasks over the last couple of days, and I'm kind of starting to question my decision. So yeah, I'll maybe have a rethink. But overall, you know, he's an experienced player. I think he came in January and did very, very well for us at a difficult period. I going over all ground, I suppose, but I like the fact that he came in on trial, worked so hard to get fit, with no guarantees of earning a deal. Then had the issues of getting signed, and then did very well for us. And I think, you know, ultimately the group as a whole respect him, appreciate. He's got an edge to him. He can get angry when he needs to, but I think he's also very good at speaking to younger players, trying to sort of give them advice, help them through, whether it's on the training ground, whether it's in games. And I think for me that's kind of the biggest thing. He wants to win, and again, I know to a degree everyone wants to win, but people have different levels, and now that impacts on them and the way they perform and demand from others. So that was the reason he was made captain. You know, it's a bit corny when people say you want 11 leaders on the pitch, all of that, but I do genuinely believe that we've got at least sort of probably 3-4 lads behind that I could quite easily make captain, and I'd be very comfortable with.
Okay, on to Weymouth, and a new era is beginning here, of course, with the new owners coming in and all the players that you've got. For somebody who's been at the club for so long, like yourself, How does it all feel to you then?
Different, in a good way, and I mean that with all due respect to what's been and gone before. There is a different feel. I think we can all see that changes are occurring, whether that's at the training ground, whether that's staffing wise, you know, some of the ideas that have been put forward, working with the trust, etc. I could go on, and there's still, I think, a lot more change to come. But I think the general thing that people might not quite sort of feel that aren't at the club is, you know, they're trying to change a culture. I'm part of that up here. We're obviously sort of two different sides, but the idea is to, you know, make sure that everyone feels together, in terms of people that work for the football club, but also making sure that the fans feel part of the club, which like I said, some of the ideas that have gone on, I think are already showing that. You know, I think even Jason going on the show last night, I think from what I can gather, was received very well. And you know, there's times when, you know, a bit like me with the sort of injuries there, you can't say everything, but just trying to be, I think, as open and transparent as possible. There's a lot of work going on with Debbie and the team down at Blundell Park, so it is really positive. You know, what I would say, and I'm not going to shy away from it, is I'm involved in some of those things, but my main job is obviously still to try to produce a team, deliver a team that can bring success on the football pitch. And if we can get results, everything seems better. You know, sometimes it papers over faults in other parts of the football club. Hopefully just this time we'll just add to a lot of positivity and things that are going well. It is a new squad. We haven't had the best preparation in terms of starting our season. As I said, we're excited to get it underway, and hopefully we can have a good season. And you know, for me, that is just trying to keep everyone on board, everyone moving in the right direction. You know, I'm not saying that it's suddenly changed, but I was at Stockport last week. They're winning the game 1-0. The crowd are bouncing. The optimism you can feel with their expectations of what they want from their season. And then at 3-1, you hear boos ringing around the stadium, and it's sort of changed. Not even in 90 minutes. It was, I don't know, maybe 60 minutes or so, and suddenly it was nice. Not nice as in watching someone get booed, but to be sat there and not being directly involved and just witnessing how quickly moods can change. And that's why, like I said, I'm not shying away from the fight. We've got to try and produce a team that the fans can relate to. It won't always go our way, we know that. It's been in this long enough. There'll be ups and downs, but you know, we'd love to get off to a winning start.
What do you feel this squad is capable of this season?
Again, I'm going to go back to that word, honesty. Not sure. I think we've got a pretty good squad. I haven't nowhere near witnessed enough of what it can produce. Again, for various reasons. And even if we'd have had everyone fit and gone all through pre-season and we'd have won every game, it still doesn't give you that true idea. You get maybe an indication, a feeling. But at the minute, not quite sure. I would certainly hope that we were at the right end of the table and competing. There's enough clubs in this league that will be going into the they start their seasons, but with the ambition and genuine ambitions of being in the playoffs minimum. And I would say that probably includes 10 or 11 teams. And some of those, I think, are obvious to people. You know, ex-league clubs and the ones that are spending the money, you know, it's in the public domain. And then some less obvious ones. I was speaking to a fan today who was at the training ground, and I mentioned a couple of teams, and he was quite surprised that I was mentioning, and by maybe what football people feel they've got a good chance of getting in the top 7, for example.
Which ones?
Again, I just don't want to put pressure on other teams or anything, but there is, you know, I've been here before in terms of, you know, budgets and some so-called small clubs that are basically being funded a lot better than people imagine, and that's why it is. I feel like we've come back into the league at maybe the worst possible time, certainly in recent years.
Why so?
Just because clearly there are some clubs that are paying silly money for players. Thankfully, it's not all about money. It helps, but we're doing it a slightly different way, and that's not to again. They're funding the football club, Jason and Andrew, and I'm not stood here moaning about we're miles behind, but clearly it's just some people have gone slightly mad in my opinion. But I still believe that we'll be able to compete, because if I didn't, I wouldn't really be optimistic going into the season, and I am, albeit still, like I said, a little unsure exactly what we will be able to achieve.
3,000 plus season ticket holders. What have you made of the support?
I mean, you have said it's fantastic. On the back of, ultimately, I think we spoke about this at the end of last season, being relegated, and having that strange positivity around the football club, the town, bumping into people, they're still smiling, and they're like I say, optimistic is the word, and looking forward to the future, and that's an indication, I think, of how change is occurring at the football club, and we've got to try and buy into that as much as possible, and run with that and extend that for as long as we can. And that's why I said it would be fantastic if we can get off to a winning start, because it is, I think, odd to have that positivity around after a relegation. So fantastic effort from the fans, and I'm sure there'll still be a lot more that for whatever reason, whether it's maybe can't afford a season ticket or can't get to all the games, there'll be more people on top of that will attend games. And back to that, if we win more and are at the right end of the table, then I've been here, I've witnessed it, what that can do to the team, and look forward to hopefully some good days at Blundell Park and away from home. What
do you know about Weymouth that's worth knowing?
Obviously got off to a disappointing start. As I said, I went to Stockport, but I have watched the game that they lost to Boreham Wood. Also watched some of the pre-season games as well. Want to try and play football. I think in Brian Stock, someone that was involved at Bournemouth, a good player himself. You can see he wants his team to play good football. A former Grimsby Town player, Nakeem Rose, who came off the bench last week. Again, straight away it's in my mind, will he throw him in against his former club?
You didn't work with him though, did you?
No, I didn't. I've watched him a couple of times, and I know what his attributes are, speaking to the people here. So that might be a change. When they made changes last week, whether it was a sort of stage of the game and kind of going for it a bit more from being 2-0 down, trying to get back in the game, but they had some efforts towards the end where they could have forced an interesting end to that game. But ultimately, a big part of it has to be about us, because at the minute, if we do be one of the better teams in the league, which I want us to be, teams will change at times for us anyway. But because it's so early in the season, I think teams will go into it with an idea of how they like to play, and then things might change. And that can happen at any stage, but I think certainly early season. And they've had the first game, but overall they still, the start of the season, teams, players are all hopeful and full of energy and hope and desire to do well. So yes, it might not be the sort of biggest name in our league. I'd take that on board, absolutely. But again, a conversation I remember having with you, that this time I think we will all, and I mean fans, I mean people at the football club, our own players, be respectful of the league, because last time I think there was a thought, although I wasn't that first season, wasn't here from the start. I think it was just felt that we'll just go back up, and I think there's enough cases where it proves how difficult it can be. And look at the amount of ex-league clubs in the league. It's not an easy task, and you have to give every single team respect and earn the right to play and to win the game.
Final question. Last weekend, not a single home winner in the 9 opening day fixtures in the National League, with
took my start.
8 away wins. So what sort of warning does that serve to you in this game?
Yeah, like genuinely I was going to mention that, because again, I'm sure that people looking at the game will think, well, that looks like a good possibility of home win. I hope it is, of course. But it was interesting last week. I think a lot of kind of higher up in the EFL, there were more home wins with fans being back than statistically it had been proven. But for whatever reason, it didn't seem to happen in the National League. So yeah, and again, I mentioned Stockport. There'll have been other teams starting the season off with that real sort of, like I say, excitement and energy going to the game, and then probably leaving deflated. The manager will be rubbish, the players will be rubbish after one game. So no, we, as I keep stressing, we would love to get off to that winning start. But whatever happens, we've got to understand there's still a hell of a lot of games left to play. But for me, it's more not the fact of that stat particularly, but just trying to, as I said, respect the opposition, do everything we can in our power in terms of our approach, our performance, to give ourselves that best chance of winning, and hopefully sending the fans away happy and pleased that they've been able to return to Blundell Park after a long time.
Good luck, Paul. Thanks for your time.
Cheers, Matt.
Yeah, just a couple of extra